how to use the Lighten blend mode in Photoshop Elements. So we're talking about star trails in the context of star trails. Blessings Captured is wondering how to stack exposures in Photoshop Elements. So I asked him, well, hey, it's pretty easy if you know how to use the Lighten blend mode. She said, I do know it's there, but I don't know how to use it. So she provided that link, and that's great. And so let me go ahead and explain what the Lighten blend mode is in Photoshop, and then you can use it in Photoshop Elements, and from there you can shoot star trails with it. So let me pull up here Photoshop. Okay, we don't usually work in Photoshop too much, but for this particular situation in this area of photography, Photoshop is very necessary. Okay, so we're starting with a picture here of the solar eclipse that I took last month, and it's a great example for explaining how the Lighten blend mode works. First of all, we have layers over here in the layers panel. Now, when you open an image straight out of Lightroom, which I'll show you how to do in a few minutes here, you will have just one layer. In order for when you merge pictures together, you'll have multiple layers. So the topmost layer, or at least the active layer, the one at the top, you need to remember that the one on top there is called the active layer. And then there are the layers below. Lighten blend mode, what it does is when that active layer is selected, if all the pixels on that active layer are lighter than the pixels on the layers below, then those pixels will remain visible. But all the darker pixels will disappear. Let me show you what I mean. Here we have a second layer, 4 different shades, and if I set the active layer to Lighten, so it was automatically on Lighten because I had changed it earlier, I'm going to turn it back to normal. So this is what it normally looks like. And then I set that active layer, the topmost layer, to Lighten. Then you can see the Lighten mode working. If the pixels on the active layer, such as this light that's around the sun, those lighter pixels on the active layer are lighter than the pixels on the layer below it, then they will remain visible. So you can see here in the gradient from very bright to getting darker, the luminosity values of those pixels, only the lighter ones are visible. And then all the darker ones disappear, revealing the layer behind it. So you can see that in this example. In this example where you have completely black, well, you don't see any difference because there are no brighter pixels behind it. And then over here you have the gradient clipped in just a little more, and of course where it's white, everything shines through. If the pixels on the active layer, so all these pixels right here, all these light pixels, are lighter than the pixels on the layer below, then they will remain visible. But in this case, there is nothing darker underneath, and so therefore it is completely invisible. So that's how it works. You can kind of see it working here. If I have a layer underneath the layer that's set to Lighten and then I turn that on, then all the darker pixels disappear, and you can only see the lighter pixels. That's why it's called Lighten. And then you can see it can be pretty cool effect when merging photos together and doing different things in Photoshop. It's just a really cool way to merge pictures together. Alright, so here we have the blend modes. This is where it is in Photoshop, and I don't know exactly where they are in Photoshop Elements, but I have a feeling you'd be able to find them fairly easily. Now, this is how I stacked all my photos for the eclipse to create the lineup image, if you happen to have seen that earlier. So here's the first photo that I took, and I exported it out of Lightroom. It's a large file, and I brought it into Photoshop, and then here's the second photo. Now notice how the second photo covers up the first photo because it's surrounded by black. And the same with every single photo. And I arranged these pictures specifically so that it would make it look like the moon was going across at a diagonal. So these are all the pictures that I took, and as you can see in Photoshop here, they're not blending together very well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these layers and set them all to the Lighten blend mode. And now what it has done is it has caused on every single layer, anything that is dark disappears if there's something light underneath of it. So let me do that with just one. You can see this top one. If I set that to Lighten, boom. It's letting light pixels show through from underneath. And that's the way it is with every single image here. Setting them all to Lighten allows me to create that, just very quickly, simply merge, multiple photos together. Okay, and of course, wanting to make the picture look as nice and beautiful as I possibly could, I added a fill layer behind the scenes, and then this nice orange glow. And then because that orange glow was covering up the sun, I went ahead and returned the sun there in the middle to make that black. And I had my eclipse merge, collage merge. Okay, so that's how I did it with the eclipse. Now let me show you the process that you would follow if you were doing star trails. So I use Lightroom, and so I'm going to show you how I do it from Lightroom, but you can use it with any other program. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that I've got my 50 to 100 to 200 pictures in Lightroom. And of course, I would edit one picture. I'm going to go over here to the develop module, and like my star trail pictures need to have some contrast, let's say. Well, then maybe I'll add some contrast over here in the develop module and brighten it up as necessary. I'll do whatever tweaks and changes need to be made to this particular shot. In this image, I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. Okay, and let's pull the highlights down. Whoops, not too much. I guess that wouldn't be too good, but whatever I'm doing with it, I can now select all the images, 50, 100, however many they are, synchronize everything. If you cropped it, then you'll want to synchronize the crop. And then after you synchronize it and all the changes to the contrast and stuff has been applied to every single image, then I believe you can just go back to the library module. I'm going to go to the grid mode here. It doesn't really matter. I think you could do it from pretty much any view. Right click, and in my situation, I'm going to say edit in, not just edit in Photoshop. I'm going to open as layers in Photoshop. Now, if you don't have this option, if you're using another program, then just open every single individual image by itself, and then you can move them into each other in Photoshop. But Library makes it easy by opening them as layers in Photoshop. So we're going to go back to Photoshop, and this is what happens. This is what my image looks like when I open every single one of my images in Lightroom as layers. As you can see, this is the top layer, and it's the only one that's visible. If I hide it, then it now shows the second layer underneath of it. If I hide that, so on and so forth, I have all my layers right here, and I can only see the top layer because I don't have these layers set to the Lighten blend mode. So on your computer, you can do it one at a time if you want. Set each individual picture to Lighten and go through your 50, 100, multiple hundreds of pictures if you want, one by one, and then remove problems that may be on a particular layer. But if you don't want it to take forever, then there should be a way somewhere in your program to select every single layer and set it to Lighten in order for the star trails to show up across your image. Okay, so that's how to use the Lighten blend mode. And if for any reason you would like to learn more about how to shoot star trails, which I think would be a fun thing to do, here is a tutorial from Australian Geographic, and I'm going to put this here in the live chat so that you can learn more about star trail photography. I read through this and learned quite a few things. I've never actually stacked star trails before. It's always been one long exposure, and I have not done that in a long time. So there's a great article for you if you would like to continue learning about star trails. And of course, let me know if you have any questions about how to use the Lighten blend mode